That's cute, right? It's Valentine's week. That's hearts and flowers and chocolates and candies and pink and red and cutie. And also a federal bill that assigns a dollar value to love and then recalculates it if you fall in love again after your spouse dies. You guys ready? What dollar value are we placing on love? And does that number change if you remarry? And should that number be different because your spouse served in the military? I guess you get it. We are really not talking about super cute love things. We are going to talk about federal regulation around love. Is it love that we're trying to regulate here? I think it's been proven over and over again that love can't be regulated. So what we are trying to regulate here is behavior, where the law is coming up to say, if your spouse dies in military service, you get survivor benefits. And then if you remarry later, your survivor benefits can disappear. Is that because the love that you had with your first spouse or the marriage was null and void? It just doesn't exist? You didn't put the time in? Or because you've chosen to move on with your life, then anything remaining is now also gone? This might be some uncomfortable questions, but I really feel like it's worth asking. And seeing the amount of sponsors that are on this bill, it's absolutely worth taking a look at. So pour you a cup and let's get into this. House Resolution 1004. This is week 6 of 52 bills. I'm your host, Cassie Clayton, and you are on Coffee and Calculated Curiosity, where we take a look at the policies that govern us and make sure that we are investing in our own lives by understanding what legislation is being talked about by the people that we hired to legislate. Let's get into the bill, because feelings are one thing, federal code is another. Where are we going to go right off the bat? You guys already know. You guys already know where we're going next. This is week 6. We're going straight to Digital Democracy Project. Click on that drop-down menu. Go to Bills. This is a U.S. bill. It is Love Lives On 2025. House Resolution 1004. Let's start to read the bill text, shall we? Oh, and we already have some votes in here. So we haven't read it yet, but we're going to come back to looking at what this looks like. So voters are already voicing their opinions. You can see where locations are more in favor and where locations are less in favor of this bill. Before we voice our opinion, let's figure out what this bill actually says. The bill text, this is coming from Congress.gov. This is in the 119th Congress, first session, HR 1004, to amend Titles 10 and 38. So, we have to go find those. United States Code to improve benefits and services for surviving spouses and for other purposes. In the House of Representatives, February 5th, 2025, Mr. Hudson for himself, and then we have several other representatives, introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on Armed Services and in addition to the Committee on Veterans Affairs for a period to be subsequently determined by the Speaker, in each case for consideration of such provisions as fall within the jurisdiction of committee concerned. Let me mention, when we have one main name mentioned here, that means they are the primary sponsor. We haven't talked about sponsors very much yet in the channel, but we can start to do a little bit more. Let me show you what that looks like. So if I go to congress.gov and I'm looking for, she said it was like love lives on. She says, so 119th Congress, maybe I know that the number here. And then I want to go find this bill. I hit search. So what this is going to bring up and where I can go and look to see is who is the main sponsor. The main sponsor is a Republican out of North Carolina named Rep. Hudson, so Representative Hudson. But I want to show you that there are so many other things here to be looking at. And again, when we want to start to think about policy, we don't necessarily want to think about party. We want to read what's in the policy. Does that make sense to us? Does that make sense for where we live? Does that make sense for what we know about the world? Is there more things to question? Can it be improved? Is it great as it is? We don't want to stick with who sponsored it. We don't know that person personally. Maybe we put them in office and maybe we didn't. We want to look at what did the words of the bill actually say. So we can see who the sponsor was. Currently, there are 133 co-sponsors. That's a lot. I mean, the House has 435 members. So 133, this is 30% of the House. It's co-sponsored already. That would mean that this bill has a pretty good chance of going to the floor for a vote, and then all 435 representatives could vote on this bill. And then we can track how they voted one way or the other. Now, what we can highlight here is how many sponsors are Republican, how many sponsors are Democrat. This was introduced by a Republican. If we're curious about a very specific state, that is also available for us to look into. So let's say that we live in Georgia. There are 4 House representatives in Georgia who have co-sponsored this bill. 2 of them are Democrat, 2 of them are Republican. According to the 2020 census, Georgia did not lose or gain any seats of representatives. They have 14. 4 of the 14 have co-sponsored this bill. And we see cross-partisanship here, which is amazing. And different ones came on at different times. You can see when the date was that they co-sponsored. Bills do reach a time where you cannot co-sponsor any longer. So I say that to say this bill has a decent amount of support. If 30% of the House has already co-sponsored it. And we have a vast amount of bipartisanship that we're seeing on a bill like this. Mr. Hudson is the person who brought it to the House. He could have written it himself. His team could have written it. A lobbyist could have written it. A veteran could have written it and lobbied for it to get to him. There are a few different ways that happens. Okay. Moving forward. To amend Titles 10 and 38 of the United States Code to improve benefits and services for surviving spouses and other purposes. Let's look and see if those are amended in here or if we need to go and read them first. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of Congress assembled. Section 1 is the short title. This act may be cited as the Love Lives On Act of 2025. Modification of entitlement to veterans' dependency and indemnity compensation for surviving spouses who remarry. Let's look up indemnity compensation. Okay, this is from the VA. If you're a surviving spouse, child, or parent of a service member who died in the line of duty, or survivor of a veteran who died from a service-related injury or illness, you may be able to get a tax-free monetary benefit called the VA Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, DIC. Find out if you can get VA benefits or compensation. Okay. So for something like this, it's already saying if you're eligible as a surviving spouse, you may be eligible for these compensations if you lived with the veteran or service member without a break until their death, or if you've separated, you weren't at fault for the separation. One of these other things must be true. So one of these first two things have to be true, and then one of these other things have to be true. You married the veteran or service member within 15 years of their discharge from the period of military service during which the qualifying illness or injury started or got worse. Or you were married to the veteran or service member for at least 1 year. Or you had a child with the veteran or service member. So already we have to have a layered structure of two things, one from this first list, one from this second list, before you were even considering getting eligible. And then if you remarried, you can continue to receive compensation if one of the below describes you. Okay, so this is probably the part that they're going to be changing. You have to provide evidence of your claim. This isn't something super easy to do. So it's not just, oh, we decided to get married and I was married to somebody who was in the military and so now I get their benefits. That is not it. There are always additional rules to look into. It is really not easy to get money from the government if you are not a big business. And it's definitely not easy to get a lot of money from the government if you're not a big business. And it's certainly not easy to get a lot of money that's reoccurring from the government if you're not a big business. You have got to go through a lot of forms and a lot of checklists to be able to see if you even qualify for some sort of benefit. And then you have to do the paperwork correctly. Okay, so we're going to move on. The next sections. Section 103 of Title 38 of the United States Code is amended in paragraph by inserting before the remarriage in clause as designated by subparagraph by striking notwithstanding the previous sentence and inserting the following notwithstanding clause, and by adding at the end the following new clause. Notwithstanding clause, the remarriage of a surviving spouse shall not bar the furnishing of benefits under section 1311 or 1562 of this title to the surviving spouse of the veteran. And in paragraph, by striking subparagraph A and by renumbering subparagraphs B through E as subparagraphs A through D respectively. Okay. So we should probably go and find Section 103D of Title 38 of the United States Code. There are a few places we can go to read the U.S. Code without needing a password to get in. We've gone to Title 38, which is Veterans Benefits. Then we're going to Section 103. That's what is being called out in the bill here, 103D. And we want to go in and look at this. This is special provisions relating to marriages. So it's going to pop up for us here, and we will be able to start reading it. Kind of what I talked about last week. Specific words have to be specifically written into specific law for someone to use them. This is another example of that, where here, okay, paragraph 2B, they're wanting to add the letter I right before this takes off the remarriage. It would have been really cool if they would have made this actually the way that they were going to do it, notwithstanding the previous sentence and inserting the following 2 notwithstanding clause by adding the end of the following clause, notwithstanding clause. The remarriage of a surviving spouse shall not bar the furnishings of benefits under section 1311 or 1562 of this title to the surviving spouse of a veteran. And then they're going to reallocate the lettering. The previous sentence would be changed. The remarriage after age 55. This one's really not very pretty. I think we could make it much better. Okay, we'll draw this out. So what it will actually look like, basically they're removing the age restriction of if you got married before if you were remarried before you were 55, you would not be able to get the benefits, but now they're removing that age restriction. So the new amended section actually looks like this. D to B, I. The remarriage after age 57 of the surviving spouse of a veteran shall not bar the furnishing of benefits specified in paragraph 5 to such person as the surviving spouse of the veteran. 2. Notwithstanding clause 1, the remarriage after age 55 of the surviving spouse of the veteran shall not bar the furnishings of benefits under section 13 of section 1781 of this title to such person as a surviving spouse of the veteran. 3, notwithstanding clause 2, the remarriage of a surviving spouse shall not bar the furnishing of benefits under section 1311 or 1562 of this title to the surviving spouse of the veteran. As you can see, much clearer. All right. And then the subsections are moved. Before this bill, remarriage rules were layered and age dependent. After this amendment, section 1311, which governs dependency and indemnity compensation, is carved out entirely from remarriage penalties. So that's the structural change that's happening here. Let's get into the next section. Continued eligibility for survivor benefit plan for certain surviving spouses who remarry. This is in section 1450 of Title 10, so we're going to need to go to Title 10. Payment of annuities to beneficiaries. Here we go, 1450, and our bill is telling us B2. Termination of spouse annuity upon death or remarriage before age 55. An annuity, and that's where this is starting. So they want to strike out an annuity by striking an annuity and inserting the following. In general, subject to paragraph B, an annuity, and by adding at the end of the following new paragraph, treatment of survivors of members who die on active duty. So we can see right now what happens is if before the age of 55, if someone dies or is remarried, there are no more annuity payments. An annuity for a surviving spouse or former spouse shall be paid to the surviving spouse or former spouse while the surviving spouse or former spouse is living, or if the surviving spouse or former spouse remarries before age 55 until the surviving spouse or former spouse remarries. It makes love not cute, right? Yeah, it makes love and relationships not super cute. But that's where money is. The money is in the law. The money is in the code. I need for us to remember that every time we start to get a little annoyed or losing focus. The money to get something is in the law and the code. It's not in the feelings. Okay, let's keep going. If the surviving spouse or former spouse remarries before reaching age 55 and that marriage is terminated by death, annulment, or divorce, payment of the annuity shall be resumed effective as the first day of the month in which the remarriage is so terminated. However, if the surviving spouse or former spouse is also entitled to an annuity under a plan based upon the marriage so terminated, the surviving spouse or former spouse may not receive both annuities but must elect which to receive. What they want to add in. So this whole section would be updated to look like the following. Termination of spouse annuity upon death or remarriage before age 55. In general, subject to subparagraph B, an annuity for a surviving spouse or former spouse shall be paid to the surviving spouse or former spouse while the surviving spouse or former spouse is living, or if the surviving spouse or former spouse remarries before reaching the age of 55 until the surviving spouse or former spouse remarries. B, treatment of survivors of members who die on active duty. The Secretary may not terminate payment of an annuity for a surviving spouse described in subparagraph A or B of section 1448 of Section 1448D1 solely because that surviving spouse remarries. In the case of surviving spouse who remarries before reaching age 55 and before the date of enactment of the Love Lives On Act of 2025, the Secretary shall resume payment of an annuity to that surviving spouse, except as provided by Clause 2 for each month that begins on or after the date that is 1 year after such date of enactment, or also to the first day of the first month beginning after such date of enactment in case of surviving spouse who elected to transfer payment to that annuity of a surviving child or children under the provisions of Section 1448D2B of this title as in effect on December 31st, 2019. So previously, if you remarry before 55, your annuity stops. And then if you had remarried, but then you got divorced or widowed again, the annuity would come back. After this amendment to the bill, if the service member died on active duty, remarriage no longer triggers termination. So again, very, very specifically, this isn't even about anybody who remarries anyone. If you were just a surviving spouse of someone in the military, that military person had to have died on active duty. Okay. You understand now? It is very specific and layered. It is not something very easy to get or to have. And it does require making sure that all of the different pieces of information are there. So this is, again, another carve out, but it pertains to those very specific layered eligibility requirements. The remarriage penalty is still existing generally, but not for survivors of military members who died on active duty. And you can retroactively reinstate some of those benefits for people who have lost these benefits because they were married to a service member who died on active duty and then they remarried and they no longer have those benefits right now. Okay. All right, one more piece. We've got one more piece and let's go get it. Let's go get it. Expansion of definition of dependent under TRICARE program to include remarried widow or widower whose subsequent marriage has ended. We're still in Title 10, but we need to go to Section 1072, medical and dental care. So TRICARE is probably underneath there. TRICARE is very specific to the military, and that is the military's healthcare program. Okay, 1072 definitions. Here we are. Let's go take a peek. What are we wanting to update? By adding at the end of the following: a remarried widow or widower whose subsequent marriage has ended due to death, divorce, or annulment. A person who would qualify as a dependent under Clause G. So G, H, and J are going to be a little bit amended here based off of what the bill is saying. G, a person who is the unremarried former spouse of a member or former member who performed at least 20 years of service, which is credible in determining the member or former member's eligibility for retired or retainer pay, equivalent pay, etc. A person who would qualify. Okay, so this adds an entire new section, which is J. So we've got all of that. We've got G, we have H, we moved some things down, how it is currently written. If a surviving spouse remarried, they are no longer considered dependent for TRICARE, even if that later marriage ended or they were widowed again or they got a divorce, etc. After this amendment, if the subsequent marriage ends, they re-enter eligibility as a defined dependent if J is added to Title 10 under the definitions, which are in Section 1072. So this section does not rewrite eligibility rules. It does add a new definition, and it says that a remarried widow or widower whose later marriage ends is, again, considered a dependent under TRICARE. So that is a very big difference and interesting access for health care, because health care is something that is generally tied to employment unless you're able to afford a standalone plan. So basically, if we review what we've just reviewed in this 4-page bill, Title 38 fixes the compensation. Title 10, the amendments to Title 38 would fix the compensation. Title 10 would fix the pension annuities. And then in Section 1072 would fix the healthcare eligibility. All three remove the structural penalties tied to being remarried had you already been someone who was married to a service member, and all those other conditions apply. All right, let's get into the Kialo discussion and start talking about what are the pros and cons of a bill like this one. Let's just read what have popped up here already. This legislation promotes fairness by extending benefits regardless of marriage status, recognizing past contributions and sacrifices made by military families. It ensures access to health care through TRICARE for remarried widows and widowers whose subsequent marriage ends, offering necessary medical support. The bill provides continued financial support for surviving spouses who remarry, reducing financial stress and insecurity after loss. So why vote yes on a bill like this? Even if we leave out the emotional of, oh, this person was married and they lost their spouse, and oh, this person found love again and that's so lovely. Let's take those out. If this bill is passed, surviving spouses don't lose benefits simply because they remarry. A yes vote on this is something that would be looking at like a service member's sacrifice for a country, their life being sacrificed, them dying in the act of service is permanent. That has happened. That hopefully paid for freedom for the rest of us in one way or another. And this is where you get the freedom isn't free catchphrase. That happens all the time. So if you're someone who had a spouse who died, regardless of how long you were married to them, whether or not you had a child, they were someone that you were dependent on, their sacrifice and their life being lost from this planet is permanent. That's happened, whether or not you remarry. So maybe taking some context around the permanency of someone's life being put on the line for the country and them paying the ultimate sacrifice, which was death in this case. Does that translate to that survivor, their spouse, should have benefits for the rest of the spouse's life? This also strengthens military recruitment. If a message comes along that, hey, Congress is standing behind you and your family, if something happens to the spouse that's in the military, we're going to take care of the rest of the family no matter what happens later on. It does signal to active duty service members that their families won't face conditional penalties later on, because the current as set up does feel rather conditional, right? There's already conditions you have to meet, and then there are additional conditions on top of the conditions. This also actually frees up some complexity in administration. As we read through, and as you read through with me, it's a lot of like, if this, and or this, yes, conditions. By removing something like an age limit, it's just less bureaucracy across. There's fewer calculations. There's still all of the other things that you have to meet, but there are less calculations across the board. Fewer reinstatement cases across the board. Ideally, that would streamline survivor benefit administration. Voting yes on this aligns with a lot of veterans group, military family advocacy organizations. I would say public sympathy is probably here. Survivor benefits are earned through service, not conditional on lifelong widowhood. Just a quick peek at organizational positions that we're already seeing, at least what's in digital democracy so far. We don't have anything on record in the oppose box, but we do see a lot of veterans associations in support of this bill. Along with the bipartisanship that we see, 133 sponsors, that is a lot of support for a bill like this. So who would oppose? Why would we be thinking maybe there's something here? There's clearly people that aren't as much favor. The law might inadvertently create administrative challenges and complexity in determining eligibility and managing benefits across different cases. It could discourage remarried individual from pursuing new self-sufficiency, possibly affecting motivation to seek alternative financial independence. This bill might lead to increased government expenditure to cover ongoing benefits for additional individuals with remarriage extensions. Let's break that down. I would say the first one that we always are going to come back to is, what does it cost? This would be increased federal spending. The military is not making budget and spreadsheet estimates every time someone joins the military about how much survivor benefits would cost them if someone passes away in the active service later. That's not happening. They are looking at recruiting numbers, who's here, how many bodies do we have, what is the size of our force. They're not looking at, can we pay out all of these spouses later if something terrible were to happen. Number one would be federal spending. This may have an increase in federal spending because there are additional survivors of service members who would be eligible for these benefits and for longer. Is Congress prepared to expand lifetime benefits without offsetting that revenue from somewhere? Where is the revenue going to come from? Are taxpayers going to vote on this, or will they pull it from somewhere else? Is it fair? I think this one kind of gets to the equity kind of question in the middle. If survivor benefits were historically designed as an income replacement, then remarriage being that income replacement again. So maybe why should taxpayers continue funding survivor payments if a spouse now has another source of household income? It's a structural question. It's an observant question. It is meant to be asked, so we would want to ask it. If benefits are meant to replace lost financial support, remarriage arguably changes that equation. Is that what those benefits are for? Are those benefits a financial replacement, or are those benefits a thank you for sending your spouse and we're sorry they died in the line of duty? You tell me. I'm not here to tell you what to think about it. I'm just proposing some questions and we're reading through the bill. So someone opposed to this bill might say, why does the military survivor policy get different treatment than civilian systems? And again, is someone losing their life in service of the whole country in those other civilian systems? And if not, are these really very different, and then it shouldn't be comparable? Some opponents worry that guaranteeing survivor income after remarriage could change the economic calculus for widows and widowers weighing work, caregiving, or career decisions, because survivor benefits are stable, often tax-free, and they're lifelong. But unlike many federal programs, these benefits aren't cut off if you earn income. So this is an economic trade-off concern. It's not a structural incentive penalty. It's not like unemployment. For unemployment benefits in a lot of places, if you're on unemployment and then you also work while you're on unemployment, you don't get both. The unemployment is removed because you've got employment pay coming in. In this scenario, we're talking about maybe $20,000 a year at a base rate. $20,000 a year, in addition to something else, can certainly change your life, can certainly give you more of a steady, affordable place to be able to live, to be able to pay for all of the things that life currently costs. But $20,000 alone is not enough to live off of, right? So the argument that this will prevent people from wanting to work, they will just be lazy and they're just going to live off the government in this. $20,000 a year. And we could look at what is the current poverty rate. USA Facts for a family of 4, if you are at $33,000 a year, that is the federal poverty line for a family of 4. For a family of 3, it's 27 person. But we wouldn't be talking about a single person. We would be talking about somebody who's remarried. So in a household of 2, that's what we need to look at. Federal poverty level ranges. A household of 2, that is showing up at $21,000 $600. So just to keep in mind that when we're talking about survivor benefits, that might be coming in monthly around $1,600 to maybe equal $20,000 for the entire year. That is still below the poverty line for a family of two. You still need to be able to afford the rest of your life. This is not something that it is substantial. It's helpful. Any amount of more money, especially for anyone who is below a very high millionaire earner class, any amount of money like this is going to be helpful, period. It's not going to be enough to sustain your life. Okay, so those are some of the pros and cons. Let's talk about contacting our House representatives, because this is something we can all do, because this is a federal bill that is in the U.S. House. Yay. You could take some time, and if you go back into the congress.gov where we were, look at the co-sponsors. If you could put in your state and be like, oh, does somebody in my state already support this? Go ahead and email them and tell them, I want you to keep up on this one. Straight to another favorite place, Ballot Ready. All right. So for Ballot Ready, you're going to want to grab your address and you're going to want to put that zip code in here. And we have been talking Lappaha, Georgia, and we want to go meet our representatives. Easy. And we want to go to our federal level. Click into that. Who is our House representative? Austin Scott. Okay. So at that point, you would be like, I need to contact Austin Scott. He's in the 8th District. Great. I have an email address. You can also call him on the phone. We are going to go back into Digital Democracy Project. And you guys, we have a brand new VoteBot that launched over the weekend. It's really exciting to see. VoteBot 2.0. I'm in love. So let's bring this all the way up. Totally appropriate for the love week. To be in love. Okay, so let's go grab our prompt, as we talked about last week, to be keeping a prompt. So we're going to toss that prompt into VoteBot. VoteBot, pull a statement I can use for House Resolution 1004 regarding love lives on. I said let love live. Love lives on VA benefits that I can send to my representative and support opposition and neutrality on the bill. So VoteBot 2.0 is going to do that for us. Notice the fun new colors. It's really great. And you're going to notice some more interaction, different links that you can click, supporting statements to be more visible and vocal. Just really, really excited about these changes. So here we have our support statement, we have our opposing statement, and we have our neutral statement. And feel free to personalize these statements before sending them to your representative. If you'd like to officially cast your vote on this bill, you can do that in the Votes app here with the Digital Democracy Project. You can simply click Digital Democracy Project and go to vote directly in your browser or on the mobile Votes app, both of which are going to allow you to anonymously show up on the map. If you'd like to make more of your opinion known for other representatives to be able to see, you can do that here. I would love to encourage you to do so, as love is the theme this week. All right, so grab your statement. You're going to grab the statement that you want to do, and then you're going to go back to your representative, your House representative for your state in your congressional district, and you're going to send them a note. I'm going to go do mine. Hold on. In looking at the list of co-sponsors, I can see that my House rep is already a sponsor of this bill. So I can take this moment to say thank you for supporting HR1004. And that's it. Thank you for sponsoring it. I don't have to go through a whole spiel. I can say why I also like it, but just sending them a simple thank you for also sponsoring it and being supportive of it, that's going to be good enough. Because again, it just lets them know, hey, we're watching you. We see what you're doing. We're paying attention. We're building in part of democracy. Okay, I contacted my rep, and I hope that you are doing the same. You know, love is a lot of things. It is emotional. It is financial, it's structural, it's about how we live our lives. And we don't get to decide what someone else's love was or how valuable it was. What we can do is express our gratitude to those families who make the ultimate sacrifice, because those do benefit us. Let's ask ourselves, do our policies reflect that gratitude? That's what democracy is also about. And on this Valentine's Day, spread some love in your life by thinking through the policies that allow you to live out the love that you would like to see in the world. This has been week 6 of 52 Bills. I'm Cassie. Thanks for having a sip with me.